international concern as North Korea launches a long-range missile. The West fears a similar rocket might one day be nuclear-armed. The UN says it's a violation of resolutions. As the violence continues in Damascus, there's diplomatic progress for the opposition coalition. Washington recognizes it as the representative of Syria, in spite of links to jihadists who are now outlawed by the US. The man who inspired the Beatles and other musical legends has died. Ravi Shankar brought the sound of the sitar to a world audience. Thank you very much for joining us also in this opening slice of the program. We have business for you. A closer look at the woes facing Peugeot Citroën. The French car maker has plans to cut another 1,500 jobs. And in Media Watch, see what the Holy See has tweeted. Pope Benedict has made his first contribution on Twitter. James Creedon with the 140 characters that launch the Catholic Church on a new path of communication. The UN Security Council has condemned the firing of a long-range missile by the North Koreans. This was how the news was told to the people of the world's most secretive state.
12월 10일 평안북도 철산군 소일 이송 발사장에서 운반 로켓 은하 3을 통한 광명성 3호 2호기 위성의 발사가
Pyongyang has called it a satellite launch. The rocket crossed Japanese territory before its debris landed off the Philippines. While celebratory images aired by North Korean television contrast with the disapproval in the West. It's feared a similar rocket could one day carry a nuclear warhead, and given the North Koreans' past detonations of underground nuclear bombs.
Braving freezing temperatures, Pyongyang residents danced and cheered on the streets to celebrate their country's successful rocket launch.
I'm proud to be Korean. The successful launch of Kwangmyong-song 3 is proof of North Korea's top cutting-edge science and technology.
This demonstrates that our country is strong and prosperous, and that our future will be stronger and more prosperous under the leadership of Marshal Kim Jong-un. The launch came as a surprise. Less than a week ago, the communist state said technical problems might delay the event. An even greater surprise was that a satellite apparently reached orbit. Many fear North Korea may now be capable of sending a warhead across continents, notably aimed at the United States. Western observers say this marks the country's first successful long-range missile test after a series of failed attempts since 1998. Critics don't believe in North Korea's stated aim, a peaceful space exploration.
It's extremely regrettable and totally unacceptable conduct. North Korea ignored repeated warnings and demands by the international community not to go ahead with the launch. Our government, along with the international community, strongly denounces the act.
Even the North's closest ally, China, called the launch regrettable, though it remains cautious about increasing economic sanctions. Under UN resolutions, North Korea is banned from using ballistic technology.
France 24's Nathan King has more on the reaction of the United Nations.
Unfortunately, these things happen nearly every year now, and the Security Council meets. They issue a statement condemning it, drawing attention to the fact that it lies in the face of not one but two Security Council resolutions, which basically say that DPRK, North Korea, cannot use ballistic missile technology, and then they go away and talk about further sanctions, and they tighten sanctions a little bit on North Korean firms, but generally that's not where the action is when it comes to North Korea. There is a permanent veto of China, which of course has backed North Korea in the past, so there is unlikely to be a binding resolution at this stage. Those only came in the wake of nuclear tests in 2006 and 2009. What really needs to happen in terms of the diplomacy of this is the six-party talks, which involves Asian countries and of course the United States. There is alarm, I can tell you, in the corridors that this actual test worked, as last year's did not. Remember back in 2012, and this actually launched a satellite. So there is a big worry that ballistic missile technology, when it comes to the North Koreans, is actually advancing.
Nathan King there at the United Nations. Hugo Chavez is facing a complex and hard post-surgery period after a fourth cancer surgery in Cuba. Venezuela's vice president has asked the people to pray for him. Nicolas Maduro has warned Chavez faces difficult days that lie ahead. Chavez was re-elected for a 6-year term in October, but there are doubts that he'll be fit to take office in January. Chavez has named Maduro as his successor, should that be the case. 3 explosions have rocked the Interior Ministry in Damascus. Images aired by Syria's state TV broadcaster appear to show the wreckage of the buildings. It's located in the southwest suburb of the capital, the scene of fierce fighting between rebels and state forces. Syria's opposition coalition has gained the approval of the United States, but Washington says it's standing by its decision to place one of the jihadist groups fighting alongside the rebels on the terror list.
Ministers and delegates from over 100 countries all agreed that the Syrian opposition is now the sole legitimate representative of the Syrian people.
Some countries have resisted the idea of a transition because they have seen no alternative to Assad's leadership. Well, now the world can see that there is an alternative.
Many countries have also stepped up their promises of aid, with pledges of communications and logistical equipment, as well as humanitarian assistance.
In real terms, this means, for example, that Saudi Arabia has promised $100 million in aid to the coalition to help the Syrian people both in the country and in neighbouring countries.
But Western governments didn't make any promises to arm the rebels. They fear weapons could fall into the wrong hands, as was the case in Libya last year.
Also look to the coalition to stand firm against extremists who would hijack the resistance for their own ends, or to sow division among Syria's communities. Human rights abuses cannot be tolerated, no matter who commits them.
Burns is referring to groups of Syrian rebels like the Al-Nusra Front, a jihadist organization that the United States put on their terrorist blacklist on Tuesday, a decision the Syrian opposition has asked the US to reconsider.
We all love our country, and while we may disagree on some things, we are all using our weapons for the fall of this tyrannical, criminal regime.
The next step, trying to form a transitional government. Meanwhile, the US has invited the leader of the Syrian National Coalition to Washington.
Let's get some analysis of the situation now. The Middle East expert Majid Rafizadeh joins us by phone. Good evening to you, Majid. Washington then recognising the Syrian opposition coalition. This is very much a key moment. But how important do you think is this difference of opinion over the jihadists, Jabhat al-Nusra?
Well, I think this is an important development, Mark, and I think this might be a game changer, the recognition of the Syrian opposition and uniform Syrian opposition coalitions. I think it could keep the balance against Assad regime. And I think your question is important because the Western countries and other Arab countries, I think they have recognized the threat of some small groups inside Syria, Salafist, Islamist, jihadists, who are actually overtaken the revolutionaries, and they have been committing terrorist acts inside Syria, and that has been one reason that they pushed forward in order to recognize the Syrian opposition groups.
Majid, given the words coming out of the Friends of Syria meeting, which has taken place in Morocco, I'm thinking of the words of Laurent Fabius of France and William Hague of Great Britain in particular. Do you see any other significant developments that could, in your opinion, bring us peace in Syria?
Well, I think one of the important things, is providing some humanitarian, aid to the Syrian refugee, and especially the displaced Syrian inside Syria, that around they constitute around 10% of the population. And since we are in the urgent need of the urgent mode of the winterization, where bitter and bone chilling winds, and in order to help the people to survive the winter, I think this would be one important thing to do. But I think the other thing comes to the newly formed oppositional groups, that they have to gain the legitimacy of the minorities inside Syria, particularly the Alawite community, and the reach to the high official security Alawite seniors in Syria, and convince them that the post-Assad area would be safe for them, and also to be able to coordinate some
internal military actions in Syria, and we have yet to see how they will go forward and how they will gain that legitimacy credibility. Because if they don't do that, I think the newly formed opposition will also disappear and fracture. So,
Majid Rafizadeh, we need to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your analysis of the situation.